Good morning, Wisconsin. Great to be with you today on this lovely Ash Wednesday and a blessed Lent to all of you who celebrate. We got a packed show, man. This needs to be a 2-hour show. I'm joined in studio by Jake Curtis. He's general counsel for Institute for Reforming Government. We're going to talk about President Trump's speech last night. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court race. We might even throw in a little March Madness. Stay tuned. Yes, Jake, thanks for being here. Let's start there. President Trump addressed joint session of Congress last night, and it was a very long speech, 100 minutes or so. And what stood out to me is that, there was a lot of policy covered, whether it was the economy, the immigration, foreign policy. There was a lot covered, and there was a very bipartisan tone, I think. And I thought that after watching it, I would see the reaction, and the polling suggests that people were very divided. But what we saw from the latest CBS YouGov poll is that 76% of the people who watched that actually said they approve of what was said there. What were some of your takeaways from that speech?
Sure. And I would agree with your kind of initial analysis. When you look at kind of the issues that President Trump was focusing on, he was very strategic. And it was a long speech, but there were clearly some kind of focus areas, and he focused on the areas that frankly have a lot of consensus. And even the ones that maybe if you looked at the kind of media coverage over the last week, you would think there's a lot of divisiveness, but, for example, take Ukraine. Maybe not how all of us would have approached, a meeting with Zelensky, but, I think it's fair to say a lot of even certainly center right and even some on the left agreed not a great strategy on the part of Zelensky to come into the Oval Office and not be willing and ready to actually negotiate, to demand these security guarantees. And so I'm just saying all that as an example of, if you looked at kind of like the media hysteria following Zelensky, you would think that that's an issue that Trump wants to avoid. That's a winning issue right now, because even moderates to maybe even some Democrats are starting to look at something like this ongoing conflict. We've gone through this, right? When you look at Iraq and Afghanistan, like, the American people don't want these never-ending conflicts. Mm-hmm. So to continue to fund a war with no clear end game is not a winning strategy. And those are the type of issues that President Trump focused on last night.
Well, and even what we saw during that speech is he announced that there was going to be a deal, that Zelensky actually sent the president a letter, and perhaps this strategy worked. I mean, he focused on a lot of the successes, and he focused on a lot of things where we had these ongoing issues and the American people wanted change. And so we got to try something a little bit different. He focused a lot also on immigration and securing the border. Again, a winning issue that if you didn't stand up and applaud when they talked about Lake and Riley and the Lake and Riley Act, I mean, something has to be significantly wrong with you.
Well, and that gets to, I've talked about this before. I think Steve and I have talked about this. I am surprised that following the fall results, and I've tried to be pretty objective. Do I think that it was some enormous landslide? Obviously, it wasn't. But frankly, Stephen A. Smith, right? Even some folks on the left have continued to make the point, like, you cannot dismiss the results. And while it may not be a landslide, there was a significant shift, right? And if you want to use the M word, right, a mandate, call it what you want, but he won every swing state, did very well with certain, frankly, minority groups that don't historically vote Republican. There's a shift in focus, right? When it's something like immigration, right? The American people want to see a change in kind of immigration policy. They don't want our border overrun. And I am surprised that the left and even some of the media they're still pressing some of these same messages that are just not resonating with the American people. And I don't quite understand why they don't kind of see, and last night was a perfect example of these issues that President Trump is focusing on, and he may be kind of a disruptor right now, and he may be doing this in an unconventional manner. Like, these are issues that people care about. I mean, people care about border security overnight, essentially. I mean, and this isn't, Trump can certainly get hyperbolic, but he's not when it comes to immigration. I've looked at the numbers. I'm passionate about this issue at IRG. We did a report. I mean, you had months where it was approaching 300,000 border encounters under the Biden administration. Yes, halfway through 24, the border encounters decreased because Biden himself signed an executive order, which frankly just further fed into the narrative that he could have stopped this and he chose not to. And now, certainly with a different administration, a different approach, border encounters are at effectively zero. And that just further feeds in the narrative that we could have stopped this. We didn't have to have this issue, and that's an issue that the American people care about. And that's why Trump is talking about it during his State of his Union. He's not talking about some of these other issues that the media wants him to.
Well, one of the biggest issues for voters and the American consumer is the economy. And he is getting some pushback that he didn't really talk about the economy until a little bit later. And he already instituted these tariffs, which I think sent the market into a spiral. But then he added that he's asking Congress to pass this budget reconciliation that would include no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. So was this really good timing for him in terms of being able to balance those two very, very divergent issues that have to do with the economy?
Yeah, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Like, it was really a timing issue. So with implementation of the tariffs, I mean, I think it's going to take time, for better or worse.
Well, and we might have a deal in the coming days. I mean, maybe this strategy worked. Who knows?
You may have a deal with Ukraine with President Zelensky. Implementation of the tariffs may lead to some sort of deal with Canada or Mexico. So the timing was interesting, and I think that's why Trump really didn't want to focus on it as much as maybe some of these other issues, because from his perspective, I think there needs to be some time to see if additional deals can be cut. And really to see how it impacts. I mean, yes, the markets reacted to it in a negative way. So I think that's another example of where he didn't want to focus on that because he needs time there.
It's never a dull moment with President Trump. Jay Curtis, Institute for Reforming Government. When we come back, there is a poll coming out today from Marquette University that will give us a little peek inside what's happening with the Wisconsin Supreme Court race here April 1st. We'll talk about that when we come back. Jay Curtis, IRG. I'm Tracy Johnson. You are an attorney, general counsel, right? And you're following the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, Brad Schimmel, Susan Crawford. And this is an expensive race. This has got national focus. What's driving that, and why is this so important?
So I think there's a lot of things driving it. One is, I work with some national groups. Wisconsin truly is one of the three most critical swing states when you look at national politics, obviously at the presidential level. So, I mean, just naturally, there's going to be a lot of focus and attention from various groups in Wisconsin because Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, maybe North Carolina, Georgia, depending on the year, but Pennsylvania, Wisconsin really are permanent swing state status right now. Which makes it critical, whether it's governor, Supreme Court, right, to have those levers of power. So, I think there's a lot of groups out there that want to ensure that Wisconsin, if you're on the left, that you ensure you have a Democratic governor and a progressive Supreme Court. And so right now at 4-3, right, this is a critical election because over the next 3 years, if the progressives lock in a majority, it's a progressive majority to at least 2028. If conservatives can flip it, they then have two opportunities to defend that in 26 and 27. So it's fair to say, like, this is kind of like for all the marbles, at least for the next 3 years, control of the Supreme Court is up, and there's a lot of national implications.
Well, and we see that I heard Susan Crawford at Rotary Club yesterday, and Brad Schimmel will be visiting the club in the next couple of weeks. But she really keyed in on Elon Musk and the fact that Elon Musk is involved in this race. And now we're seeing a lot of focus. This is all becoming about Elon Musk, and people's heads are exploding over it. And there's money being spent that is like an anti-Elon Musk effort. What is going to energize the voters? Because right now, what I see, I just saw some numbers on spending, they're about equal. And actually, Brad Schimmel is outspending Susan Crawford by just a very little bit. But this is going to be kind of an equal spend race. So what's going to get the bases out?
Great question. And I think what we're seeing right now is a play from the left that these national issues, that Elon Musk, that's going to be the issue that's going to drive voters, which is an interesting strategy on their part. If you look back to the 2023 Supreme Court or AC, or even 2020, that was very much focused on, on the left. The focus was abortion and the right, kind of judicial philosophy. The left seems to be kind of going all in on this Elon Musk kind of nationalization of the race, where you're making all about Trump and Musk. I don't know if that's the right strategy. Right? Trump won Wisconsin a few months ago. So, and as we started the show talking about, on some of these issues, the American people, you talk about DOGE, the American people want efficiency in government. They don't want waste, fraud, and abuse. And so to make their strategy for the Supreme Court race all about Elon Musk, I don't know if that's a winning strategy.
So what's the winning strategy then for Brad Schimmel? I mean, I am a little bit lost in this, because you are seeing ads, and granted, a lot of these ads are from outside groups. They're talking about the handling of rape kits and abortion and things like that. It's really hard for a voter to understand what's the truth and what's not. But if you're advising Brad Schimmel, what is the message that's going to invigorate that base?
Yeah, you and I talked about this yesterday. I think it's frustrating right now that I've kind of used the analogy of a tennis match, right? It's just back and forth about, plea agreements or various decisions they've made as judges that really I don't think motivate the average Wisconsin voter. At IRG, we've been focusing every week on specific issues. Not from a policy perspective, right? Because that's not the job of a judge or a justice, but how a future either conservative or progressive majority would address various issues. Act 10, school choice, Second Amendment issues, the business climate. We've been focusing on that and trying to outline how a future court would address that. I think that's what frankly, both cans should be talking about.
For the good of the voters.
For the benefit of the voters, so they can make an informed decision. Because this shouldn't, I've talked about this before. These elections should not be about a judicial candidate's values, right? It should be about judicial philosophy and how they're going to interpret cases, not their personal values.
Well, and early voting starts on March 18th, and the poll will be released today at 12:15. It will be an interesting peek at really the state of this race. And I would expect that we're going to see a lot of money continue to pour in. Jay Curtis in studio with me, Tracy Johnson, in for Steve on WTMJ. TMJ, we're breaking down the Supreme Court race with Jay Curtis from IRG. One of the big issues is around the business climate that will be significantly impacted regardless of what happens with the court because of specific cases that are before that court. Tell us a little bit about that and what we should be learning more about and watching for.
Yeah, it's one of the issues that IRG has been pushing out the last couple of weeks because nobody really is talking about it. But there's kind of some indicators that the progressive majority on the courts would definitely at least consider taking the court in a different direction. People forget, right? We had a huge deficit, right? And that was really the point of Act 10. They called it was a budget repair bill. We had to have these reforms. Act 2 in 2011 implemented a lot of these kind of tort reforms, kind of pro-business climate reforms. Wisconsin was, I think, ranked 41st in 2011 as far as business climate, rose all the way to top 10 by 2017 because of the reforms that were put in place. And so, we put a primer talking about these issues like expert witnesses and just really basic things. But again, Tracy, I know, you're involved in the business community and development. Like it's not that you're giving handouts to business. It's that you're creating an opportunity and a climate where business can thrive. And we want those pro-business policies because we're competing against 49 in other states.
About the regulatory environment. That's certainly something to watch. I appreciate all your work on that. All right, we got about 15 seconds. March Madness is coming up, and I know that this is hot for you. What are you thinking? Who's going?
So Marquette, Wisconsin, great teams. SEC is amazing. Duke is amazing, featuring Wisconsin Lutherans, Con Knippel. So just tons of Wisconsin connections, and it's going to be an exciting month. Very
exciting. Love March Madness. Jay Curtis, Institute for Reforming Government. Thank you as always. ABC News and Headlines is next.